Hello and welcome. My name is Al Barrows, and this is UFO-Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UFO, UAP news from everywhere and anywhere. Today, I'd like to relate something that I saw on Astrum. It's about why Congress is getting so serious all of a sudden about investigating the UFO, UAP issue. Could it be that they know for sure that extraterrestrials exist? On April the 16th, 2025, scientists reported a high probability that they had found signs of life on another planet. The planet in question is K2-18b, a planet twice the size of ours, located a mere 124 light years away from Earth. Two chemicals, dimethyl sulfide and dimethyl disulfide, were spotted in the atmosphere of K2-18b thanks to spectroscopic readings taken by the powerful James Webb Space Telescope. Why does this matter? On Earth, these chemicals are only produced by living things. There were over 20 times more of these gases on K2-18b than we see even on Earth, and they were identified with a 99.7% confidence. So is it possible that extraterrestrials from this planet have made their way to Earth and that Congress has been informed about it? Because according to Congress, we've known about non-human intelligences for a long time. They are already here, and the U.S. military has been covering it up for decades. There is currently a real battle raging right now between the U.S. Pentagon and Congress over the alleged existence of alien spacecraft. Congress seems certain that the military is hiding retrieved alien technology, and the Pentagon is not doing a very good job at proving them wrong. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a report on, quote, unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UAP, that made the whole idea seem much more mainstream. According to the government report, UAP, a less stigmatized acronym than UFO, but referring to the same sorts of sightings, were real and were messing with America's Navy pilots. Their frequent appearances in U.S. airspace and training areas, quote, clearly pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to U.S. national security, end quote. To be exact, they were getting so close to U.S. jets that pilots sometimes had to swerve to avoid them. In 2022, in an open congressional hearing, high-ranking members of defense and naval intelligence told Congress that this was happening frequently enough that it had become important to find out what these things were. This was no easy task because UAP come in many different varieties and so presumably required different explanations. Some were drones that followed Navy ships for hours. Some were orbs photographed outside of cockpit windows, and some seemingly exhibited strange flight characteristics that couldn't be accounted for. Incredible top speeds that broke the sound barrier, yet created no sonic boom, being able to accelerate and turn on a dime in a way no fighter jet could hope to match, or hovering motionless in the face of high winds with no visible means of propulsion. It was these that had Congress and the Navy worried, while the others could possibly be explained as enemy spying action or simple weather balloons blown off course. Some of these hinted at an intelligent force with a technological advantage over the U.S., and the Navy had no idea who was operating them or what their intentions were. Congress ordered the Pentagon to create a new department called AARO, or the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, in July of 2022, and tasked them to use a data-driven and scientific approach to figuring out what UAP were. AARO set to work and quickly identified 510 cases of reported UAPs, such as the curious and inexplicable Mosul orb, which was seen flying over a war zone in Iraq. However, Congress became unsatisfied with the answers that Arrow was giving. Arrow's first hearing in April of 2023 downplayed the anomalous aspects of the UAP, highlighting that they were likely all perfectly explainable with the right data. To many watching on the sidelines, this answer felt like the continuation of a long history of obfuscation and outright deception that had been going on for years, and their suspicions seemed to have been confirmed when David Grush became a whistleblower back in 2023. He claimed that not only did a part of the military know about UAP, but that they had recovered some of them. David Grush is an intelligence officer who had worked in the United States Air Force and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency for 14 years. As far as witnesses go, his character and credentials are impressive, and his claim was assessed as credible and urgent by the Inspector General of the intelligence community himself. Grush had little to gain from this. He was signing no book deal, and in his career, he risked becoming a pariah. Yet he testified before Congress that in the course of his duties as an intelligence officer, he had learned of a decades-long UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program being run by the members of the U.S. government without a congressional oversight. Ironically, for the methodical intelligence officer Grush, this lack of oversight was what he actually had a problem with: government money being spent without the government's knowledge. Grush claimed that whistleblowers had gone to Arrow claiming the same thing, and that Arrow had hidden any knowledge of it. Could there possibly be any truth to Grush's allegations? Unfortunately, there's some grounds to be suspicious. The Pentagon has failed every audit of its finances, being unable to account for where it spends all its money. So a secret program or two certainly could exist within the gaps. There has been a long history of U.S. government UFO programs hiding facts from the public that made this more plausible. Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book, investigations that dated back to 1947 all came under fire for being more designed to downplay UFOs than to investigate them. And these criticisms even came from the scientists who had run them. For example, one night in 1966, police in Ohio spotted an egg-like object over 10 meters across, with a cone of light beneath it, flying a few hundred feet off the ground and glowing brightly, enough to illuminate the surrounding area. The object flew over the policeman, stopped, then continued on its way. The police decided to give chase to the egg, but every time they got close, it would dart away, although it would allow them to catch up again, almost like it was waiting for them. In this way, the two policemen chased the object 60 miles across 2 states, until eventually, just as dawn was arriving, the object shot straight up into the sky. The official report from Blue Book said that it was Venus, which had been misidentified by the policeman. An explanation that was hampered when the lead scientist of Project Blue Book, a man named J. Allen Hynek, claimed that he hadn't even been asked his opinion before the department made its announcement. Plus, Venus was in the wrong part of the sky for this to make any sense at all, on the horizon rather than overhead, and was seen at the same time as the object. Some critics labeled Blue Book as the Society for Explaining the Uninvestigated due to some of the outrageous explanations they asserted, seemingly without looking into it properly. Feeding into this suspicion of a cover-up were the very real events that took place across 2023 and 2024. You may have heard of the Chinese spy balloon that flew across the U.S. in February of 2023 before finally being shot down over the ocean. There are plenty of excellent images of this 60-meter tall balloon and wreckage was collected from it after just a day. What is harder to find images for are the three other objects that were spotted on military radars soon after, which were also shot down. But while the military was quick to provide excellent images of the first balloon or a Russian jet clipping a U.S. drone just a month later, no images were released of these other three by the American government. And despite an intensive hunt, all three were never recovered. Canada, DID, released a very grainy image of one of the objects, and a story soon circulated that one of these car-sized floating objects was like a hobbyist balloon. But the lack of details surrounding it and the others left many feeling gaslit. The government's response was, everything is fine. These are explicitly not aliens. But we don't know who they belong to. A similar thing happened in 2023-2024 when drones started appearing over military bases such as Langley or American bases in the UK even, where the US were storing nukes or advanced jets, although these were most often reported in the media as happening in New Jersey, they occurred all over the world. Here's one that was sighted near Australia in March of 2025. It shares a passing resemblance to one that was seen over New Jersey. While many assumed that this was the work of foreign adversaries such as Russia or China, the government at the same time said it was all actually authorized by the FAA. But it certainly doesn't seem that way. After all, if the FAA were the ones authorizing the drones flying over sensitive air bases, why did the FAA go so far as to temporarily restrict drone flights as a way of combating them? Why fight yourself? And why weren't the military told? And why were the drones impossible to catch or detect on radar, even in the face of the U.S. military's desire to do so? And why were they shining lights as they flew, almost like they wanted to be seen? Drones the size of SUVs appearing the world over and evading capture while investigating sensitive military sites. Certainly sounds like this is not just the work of hobbyists. They could be extraterrestrial, perhaps, but at this point, Congress has gotten fed up with all the stonewalling. Soon after Grush's testimony, Congress passed a law ordering the Pentagon to hand over all their files pertaining to UAP, especially anything to do with non-human intelligence or recovered craft. The fact that a bill containing the phrase, quote, non-human intelligence, end quote, passed into law is already astounding. The fact that there were efforts to block it is concerning. It is concerning because why avoid handing over those files unless you have something to hide? In the UAP hearing of 2024, members of Congress claimed that they were facing opposition to having these hearings, and the Pentagon was refusing to hand over data such as satellite footage, and yet more and more high-ranking current or retired military officers are coming out and repeating the same story. Admirals, NASA administrators, again and again, the claim is coming forward that the members of the government are hiding something. A congressional hearing even put a name to this secret program. It's called Immaculate Constellation. Its files claimed that military servicemen have been hurt from the interaction with UAPs, and that was one of the milder claims. In the Immaculate Constellation report, there are accounts of F-22 jets being boxed in by a flight of 3 to 6 orb UAPs, which perfectly remained in formation with the helpless jet before ultimately driving it from the mission area. Another describes a softly glowing orange orb that approached a U.S. vessel, causing those who watched it to experience altered perceptions of time. When it left, the crew snapped out of a, quote, trance, end quote, before feeling a sweeping wave of profound unease. One last account describes a 200 to 400 meter wide saucer UAP that was seen on infrared satellite footage skimming above thick cloud cover. Apparently, noticing it was detected. This football field-sized behemoth then dips below the clouds again, vanishing from sight. Sadly, other than the report itself, there was no proof given that any of this was actually true. No footage, no testimony. However, Jeremy Corbell, the ufologist, released an alleged Air Force video recorded on infrared that has a striking resemblance to the one mentioned in the Immaculate Constellation report. Take a look at this. Here is the object. It's moving down from the top of the screen before veering to the right. From the size of the clouds, it is clearly a massive sphere or disk, but its 90-degree change in direction suggests it's no balloon or an object blowing in the wind. If Corbell is correct and this footage is real, it lines up perfectly with the Immaculate Constellation claim of the behemoth UAP. I also did find at least one instance of a podcast made in collaboration with NASA, where the subject was UAP. The whole podcast was an interesting dive into the possible emerging tech. One of the guests, Richard Bandurek, a former electrical engineer and mathematician, and now CEO of Field Propulsion Technologies, very casually claimed to have been part of a public sector UAP reverse engineering company. He described smart materials that he had been tasked to investigate that turned to dust if you interacted with them. And he calmly detailed his attempts to study triangular UAP that could turn invisible at will. His claims were taken as completely reasonable, and while it's easy to make claims like this, the setting the claims were being made in was the surprising part. NASA collaborated on this podcast and had guests making claims of this nature, as it's implied that tacit approval for what was being said then. Sadly, Congress has not published its own proof. So members of Congress are finally fed up with all this stonewalling and are determined to find out what's going on with the so-called UAP or UFOs. So members of Congress are uniting in their apparent belief that their own military is hiding something from them. Of course, they are privy to things that we cannot see. So whether you believe the military or not comes down to how much faith you put in their interpretation of those classified documents, videos, and their own agendas. There are unusual craft in our skies, and if the government knows what they are, they certainly are not telling us, or Congress. Whistleblowers have made claims that some of these are non-human. Of course, witness testimony is the worst kind of evidence. People can misremember things or misinterpret what they saw according to their own biases if they're not outright lying. While there are military videos that have been released that show something, none of these are the high levels of fidelity that we know the military is capable of. We don't have clear military UAP videos. What we have is grainy infrared, declassified videos given to Congress in order to placate them. But what we do have is witnesses like Grush. We have the testimony of credible witnesses such as David Grush. But he has only claimed that he was told UAP exists. He never claimed to have directly seen one. We have evidence of Pentagon stonewalling and obfuscation. Some of that is to no doubt protect sensitive military assets, either secret new technologies such as the U.S. stealth bomber, which the public was initially kept in the dark about, or sensitive devices that did the data collecting that the Pentagon doesn't want everyone to know they possess. But while this explanation is a good reason to keep it from the public, it's not a good reason to keep it from Congress. who are the ones paying for it all, and the Congress are the ones feeling stonewalled. By the way, as most of you have probably guessed by now, not every congressperson is well informed. A select few congressmen are the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. That's how it's supposed to work. These congressmen being read in so they can oversee what the Pentagon is doing while maintaining a level of secrecy. So, if this was all just secret Pentagon technology, all that would be needed is a quiet word in those ears, and those committees could tell the rest of Congress that this was one of ours. And all this public attention could simply go away. So the explanation that this is secret U.S. tech that the Pentagon isn't telling Congress about doesn't make sense. When the facts are all reviewed together, it certainly feels like something is going on. To sum it up, in the words of Marco Rubio, quote, either what the whistleblowers are saying is partially true or entirely true, end quote, he said, quote, or we have educated people with high clearances and very important position in our government who are crazy and are leading us on a goose chase. There is not a clear reason why many of these whistleblowers who are actively serving in distinguished careers would want to jeopardize their reputations. While some UFO enthusiasts have made money off discussing the topic, people like David Grush had no book they were trying to sell. Perhaps what would be helpful to hear is evidence from someone who actually was part of the secret government crash retrieval program itself, a whistleblower with footage of what they saw from much closer up. So even though David Grush never claimed to have seen a UFO or UAP himself, there are other whistleblowers like Jake Barber who claims to have not only seen a UFO, but assisted in a crash retrieval of one. A lot of the big names in UAP circles started making a big fuss back in January of 2025 about a big revelation that was about to take place. A whistleblower was coming forward with unprecedented levels of information by the name of Jake Barber. Like Rush, Barber claimed to have been working on classified projects for the government, but unlike Rush, Barber claimed to have been a pilot working within one of those programs. And although he claimed that there was danger to his life, he felt that the footage and information he held needed to come forward. Congress has not officially vetted Barber, nor do we have proof that he was working on this program at all. Of course, such is the nature of clandestine programs. They are by nature difficult to fact check. We should likely take what he says with a grain of salt. However, what he says is certainly interesting. Barber claimed that he was a pilot who would sometimes transport highly sensitive objects from one location to another. On one such mission, he flew his helicopter to an unspecified patch of desert, only to find a large, egg-shaped object there. While approaching this egg to transport it, Barber felt an overwhelming emotion come over him. He felt sadness, happiness, and the feeling that something had connected with him on almost a spiritual level. It was guiding him, and the whole experience was so overwhelming that he began to cry. He pulled himself together and continued the mission. Later, he claims that other personnel confirmed to him that what he encountered was a UAP. Apparently, the military transported these egg-shaped UAP often, and this footage came from one of those other missions. Barber himself claims to have not just encountered UAP once. In a later mission, Barber claimed that exposure to a UAP, or possibly reverse engineer technology from a UAP, led a doctor to conclude he was suffering from all the hallmarks of radiation poisoning. The doctor in question was Gary Nolan, another ufologist, but one with an extensive background in immunology and cancer research. Later, Barber left the military and together with other business partners founded the company Skywatcher. Rather than force the military to divulge what it knows in its clandestine programs, Barber is now trying to replicate the results in the private sector. But the method he is using is surprising. He and his team are not just using cameras or radar, but are attempting to connect to UAP psionically, using their minds to reach out to UAP in the same way Barber claims that the first UAP connected with him. According to Barber, there are many people capable of doing this, and for whatever reason, whatever the true nature of UAP, many of them seem to want to be connected by us in this way. And if you do it right, they are willing to come out to play. Through a mixture of on-site psychics and the use of an electric signaling device they refer to as a dog whistle, Barber's team claims that they can successfully call UAP to their location with a near 100% success rate, an extraordinary high number, making this an extraordinarily bold claim. There is video footage. It's grainy, and when you look at them, at least a couple seem likely to be balloons or birds. But this tactic of psionics and dog whistles is the method that Barber claims the U.S. government is using and is the way that the first UAP egg was called down to land in the first place. Well, what evidence do we have that what Jake Barber is doing with psionics actually works? What evidence do we have that this is true? Well, it's a documented fact that the CIA did run a psionics program from 1975 to 1995 called Project Stargate. CIA agents recruited those who were psychically gifted and attempted to use them to remotely view targets of interest amidst fears that the Russians were doing the same. While this might seem extremely out there, consider that unlike the UFO projects Sign or Grudge, which only ran for a few years each, Stargate went on for 20 years. That implies that they felt they were onto something. They also did claim some successes. Former President Jimmy Carter spoke of an incident where a crashed plane went down in Central Africa. American satellites couldn't locate it, but apparently a remote viewer was able to do so. After going into a trance, the woman wrote down some coordinates, and there the plane was. Whatever you think of the truth behind psychics and remote viewing, the idea that the American government also attempted to reach out to UAP using psionics is actually pretty unbelievable. What's a lot harder to swallow is the idea that UAP responded. So because of Congress's persistent push for answers, the government has recently begun to release declassified UFO or UAP files.
The Pentagon's latest release of UFO files, dozens of images, documents, and videos in this batch. ABC's Olivia Rubin is in Washington following this. Lots of interest in this one, Olivia. Good morning.
Of course, Rachel, good morning. The Pentagon releasing dozens of new files, including eerie new videos and images showing unexplained encounters from around the world. Just last year, this video captured in the Yellow Sea by an infrared sensor on a U.S. military platform. In the footage right there, you can see an object described in the documents as a six-pointed star hovering across the middle of the screen. And in 2015, a military camera capturing this object speeding by in the eastern United States and over the Atlantic Ocean. This video from 2020, a report describing the object as a large, somewhat deformed balloon, approximately 12 to 15 feet in height. And in one instance, a service member reporting an object he said had flight characteristics unlike anything I'd ever seen in my 28 years of service. And while these videos, of course, appear strange, there's no information here on what those objects actually are, and there's certainly no proof of alien life contained in these documents. The Pentagon says more files are coming. Gio.
So what do you think? Do you think that Congress's recent urgency for answers has anything to do with the fact that they believe or they know that extraterrestrials are here on Earth now? My name is Al Barrows. This has been UFO Disclosure. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.